How are we all doing today? You must be great because you're here again. So welcome to another story time with me, the Story Wizard. Shall we have a look and see what we got today? My Book About Me by Mr. Silly. Now that sounds very silly, doesn't it? So sit back, relax and enjoy the story. But first, roll the intro. Mr. Silly wanted to make a book. Now, what can I write about? He said to himself. He took a sip from his mug of hot toast. I know, I can write about me, he suddenly declared. So Mr. Silly got a pad of paper and began. He dipped a carrot in a pot of ink and began to write. Messily. It's not easy to write with a carrot, but Mr. Silly did not use a pen. That would be far too sensible. He wrote down the title, My Book About Me. And then he wrote about the time he went to the Nonsense Land bookshop and bought a book. One page at a time. It took a very long time to buy it. But then Mr. Silly changed his mind. Just writing about himself might be a bit boring. I would disagree, but Mr. Silly had made his mind up. Or was that down? You can never tell with Mr. Silly. He decided he would include his friends in his book. If his friends were in his book, then they would want to read it. First of all, he wrote about Mr. Wrong. Mr. Wrong reads his books upside down, whereas Mr. Topsy-Turvy reads his books back to front. So he would begin with the ending and end with the beginning. How topsy-turvy! Mr. Silly wrote about Mr. Greedy and his many cookery books, and Little Miss Magic and her amazing book of spells. Then there was a chapter on Mr. Busy, a very short chapter. Mr. Busy is too busy to ever finish a book. Finally, Mr. Silly wrote about Mr. Happy. Well, it is always nice to finish with a happy ending. Mr. Silly was very pleased with his story. He decided to invite round all his friends who were going to be in his book for the big reveal. But first he had to make it. He went out to his shed and took down a saw and a hammer and a box of nails, which was odd. It took him all night long to make the book. Mr. Silly's book was big as a house, with a door. Mr. Silly opened the door and invited everyone in. Welcome to my book, he said. I have something to announce, he continued. You will be very pleased to hear that you will all be famous because you are now all in my book. How very silly. Oh dear, Mr. Silly is very silly, isn't he? I hope you all enjoyed that story today. Thank you all for joining me. Don't forget, up here you know what to do. Down there, follow me. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye!